Hey everyone, I wanted to talk a bit today about the 1980 short novel A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This book was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in that year, but I'd never heard of it until I watched John David's rave review of it on his channel, which I'll link below. From that video and from some back and forth with him in the comments, I decided I might like it, so 8 months later, I finally took it on. Interestingly, A Month in the Country is also the name of a play by the famous Russian writer Ivan Turgenev, and although I have not read more than a couple short stories by Turgenev, given the idyllic rural vibe of the novel, I'm guessing that this parallel was no coincidence. Let me know what you think though if you're one of those probably rare souls who has read both. Though Carr's A Month in the Country was written in 1980, it deals with a period directly after World War I. A British veteran, Tom Birkin, has been rattled to the core by his experiences during the war, and this has only been made worse by some recent marital issues with his wife Vinnie. Pretty serious ones, we gather, as she seems to have basically left him. But for the summer of the book, which takes more than just 1 month, if I'm understanding correctly, Tom has retired to the countryside to do some honest work, restoring a medieval painting that was discovered in a local church. He hopes that this work will not only keep him busy, but also might do something to restore him from his broken state. Most striking in this novel is the specific mood the novel captures, one initially brought about by a loss of innocence through deep suffering, but one that involves slowly learning to live again, possibly in spite of one's knowledge that the joy we experience now is not everlasting and there will be more challenges ahead. This novel was called a quiet novel in an interview I read on NPR's website, a term that I wasn't really familiar with, but I now understand to be a fairly common literary descriptor. This is a novel that's unlikely to immediately grab the attention of modern readers amidst the flashier titles found at the bookstore. There's not a lot of action going on. I could see as much coming from John David's review, so I suppose I knew that going into it. Despite being just over 100 pages in length, it still feels rather slow, and certain sections in particular may lose the reader's attention or just keep it more at arm's length for a while, even while other sections are very memorable. This feels important though, and for those readers with the patience to appreciate such a quiet novel, I think this can be a rewarding read. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you if this isn't your cup of tea or if it's just not what you're in the mood for right now. I mean, it took me almost a year to get to it as well. The novel has a deeply reflective and nostalgic tone, which brought to mind for me Kazuo Ishiguro's novel The Remains of the Day, in which a sort of late middle-aged butler reflects on his time of service. Some might call that novel quiet too, but I don't think Ishiguro's novel is quiet or subtle, quite in the sense that A Month in the Country is. In particular, though, I think both novels come on just a bit more heavy at the end, with narrators drawing clear takeaways from their reflections. I think A Month in the Country leaves more room in this regard for the reader to frame these reflections within a wider perspective. Maybe part of this is because of the temporal distance with which A Month in the Country is narrated. We have a clear sense that this tale is being told not just next year after this experience, but many years later in the narrator's life. He isn't simply caught up in the events of the story as he tells them, which is more the case in The Remains of the Day, although Tom Birkin does admit a sense of still being swept along by these events. But this backdrop throughout the novel of the rest of the narrator's life, including not only the war and his broken marriage, but also some more vague future tribulations to which he alludes, is incredibly important for this novel because we see that this broader context of turmoil makes the often ordinary events of the novel more powerful and more broadly relevant. If the author were to have omitted these details, this wider framing, the story would for the most part be much more mundane, and even perhaps not just quiet, but boring. Another story that I found somewhat tonally similar, although maybe this is a bit of a stretch, is Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, in which a woman reflects on a specific part of her life, but very clearly within the context of everything else that has happened to her before and after that time. That book is also the inspiration for the movie Arrival, if you've seen that. I don't think this is a parallel that everyone would necessarily draw, but for me there's definitely something common there in the essence of both that story and A Month in the Country that allowed me to really appreciate each one. There's an understated passage towards the end of the book that struck me. The narrator is attending an all-day outing with a local Sunday school group, and their transportation is, of course, horses and horse-drawn carriages, and he basically says, reflecting from a point in the future, little did we know that in a few short years these companions, the horses, would vanish from the roads completely. I thought this was just so interesting because it's the kind of thing that, of course, at the time you would hardly stop and appreciate. Not that the replacement of horses with automobiles was altogether a bad change, but still something was lost there that people hardly even realized at the time they were missing. And I think this passage is quietly representative of the novel as a whole. It encourages you as a reader to appreciate those mundane things that are happening to you today, that even next year you may look back on again with nostalgia. And upon completion of the novel, I believe there is still some ambiguity as to the true value or meaning of these events for the narrator. Some readers, notably Jesse Browner in that featured article I mentioned on NPR's website, find this a story of healing and redemption. To quote one telling paragraph from that review, "Most importantly, Tom needs to be healed, as we all do to some extent. And he is, by the restorative powers of his slow, patient work, by his recognition of love, even unfulfilled love, as a regenerative force, by the erosion of his isolation in the warm waters of community. And as his month in the country comes to its gentle, quiet end, the reader too somehow feels healed, as if they had shared a common ancient hurt." I fully agree with this evaluation, and yet there may also be more to it than that. This review, to me, makes it sound more conclusive than it is, as if the month in the country has made the veteran Tom Birkin whole again, given him a new life period. It has changed him profoundly, and it has healed him, but I found there also remains this sense of impermanence to it all. A sense that as powerful and worthwhile as this summer in the country was for Tom, it ultimately does not last, and he will someday need more of this healing again. Readers may differ as to which of these attitudes come through strongest in the end, but both are undoubtedly present. Tom's own narrative comments reveal that he will someday need healing again, but having been once through this cycle of suffering followed by healing, this may give him maturity and strength needed to better bear the trials that await him in the future. And I believe the way he tells the story suggests he has gained something from the experience, more than he has lost something. It was great to read this one during the summer, which is when I read it, and during one that was going pretty well for me. Possibly because I read this book coming off from the healing of a week-long annual family vacation myself, which was relaxing and a welcome change of pace with lots of sense of family community after a while of being relatively isolated. A month in the country. Check it out if it sounds like something you might like. Thanks for watching or listening, and happy reading.